Hey everyone, welcome to the May session for Jira Software for Beginners. My name's Alex and I'm excited to be here. We are going to be doing a quick mic check and we're going to be doing a quick just little housekeeping before we get started. So if you're joining me here in the chat, if you can just give me a thumbs up or just say mic check or something along those lines, let me know that you can actually hear me. We're gonna get started here. So I'll also present my screen, and if I can get a thumbs up or a thumbs up slash mic check slash screen sharing check. Just want to make sure we can all hear and see everything. Perfect. Thank you very much, Adam. Lindsay, thank you for joining from the UK. Very excited to have you all here. This is our fifth live stream that we've done with respect to Jira Software for Beginners. So very excited to be here. We got this polished out. So hopefully we can get through this with minor hiccups, but we'll find out. All right, so let's just jump into it. If you are completely new to Jira, or maybe you've been using Jira for a while, this course, this little section here is going to be developed just for you for the next hour. We're going to take a deeper dive into what Jira software is, and I'm even going to tease some of the changes that are coming. So maybe you got a chance to attend Team 24 this year, and if you did, you probably know some of the changes that are coming up, but if you didn't, then you're definitely going to want to stick around because I'm going to be dropping subtle hints wherever I know that there's going to be changes. But as a teaser, as a spoiler, we are going to be renaming this course. So we are going to continue this beyond June. I had initially signed up for 6. This is the 5th one. And so starting in July, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be able to rename, rebrand over to just Jira for beginners. But stay tuned for that. We'll let you know. Also, a couple just housekeeping stuff. This is being recorded. Technically, it's on YouTube, so you can always come back and watch it. It's being live streamed to our YouTube channel here, so you can always come back and just watch the recording and watch the previous recordings as well. And second, we do have a moderator in the chat, so shout out to the Jira guy who's in the behind the scenes. He's just the voice for today, but he is monitoring. And so if you have any questions at all over the next hour, feel free to just drop your questions in the chat there. And we're going to be flagging these. I have some breaks built into the presentation here. And so we'll be taking a second here to answer some of those questions that get flagged. So any questions Jira related, feel free to drop them in the chat there. Okay, so what are we going to be learning today? So we're going to be taking a look at Jira Software, specifically Jira Software. There's 5 versions of Jira. There's Jira Software, which is the one we're doing. There's Jira Work Management, which may or may not. I don't want to spoil anything, but if you haven't seen the news, Jira Work Management is going to be merged into Jira Software, and it's just going to be Jira. But it's not there yet. We're not quite there yet. So for now, we're still going to keep things as is. We have Jira Product Discovery. So if you're a product manager, you may want to look at Jira Product Discovery to help with your requirements and idea development. We have Jira Service Management, which is for IT type of teams, like a help desk type of thing. ServiceNow killers, what we like to call it here at Atlassian. Well, I don't work for Atlassian, but the Atlassian ecosystem likes to call it that. And then the final one is Jira Align. And so, yeah, again, so 5 different Jiras. We're going to be focusing on the very first one, which is Jira Software. So with respect to Jira Software, we're going to be focusing on the navigation, talk about what a project is, how to create and work with issues. We'll talk about some boards, and then we'll go over to some next steps. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down. But before we get started, you're probably looking at me, and some of you may recognize me, some of you may not. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am and why you should listen up, or why I'm worth listening to here in this class here for you. So I have a bachelor's in computer engineering, a master's in systems engineering, some couple certifications in cybersecurity. Then I switched over to Atlassian. I am an ACP 520 holder. I'm not yet an ACP or what Atlassian calls an expert, Atlassian certified expert. Not there quite yet, but I do have on my roadmap my timeline to get the rest of the certifications. So those are going to be coming here very soon. But I do spend an unhealthy amount, about 12 to 14 hours inside of Jira every single day, unfortunately. So sadly. So yeah, you got an expert here. So we're going to have some fun here. Some background, I mainly come from the defense world. I was a Jira administrator and a project manager in the defense world and in small startups. Today, I just help people with the Jira problems, and I run a YouTube channel, which is the next bullet here. So you are here on the Jira Live. So this is your first time on the Jira Live. make sure you take a second here to subscribe. We do have a link there in the chat here that my partner here is dropping for you. But we have an ever-growing community here on the Jira Life. So if you want to be a part of something cool and interesting related to the Atlassian ecosystem, we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, all things Atlassian. We always have a guest. We live stream every single Thursday. In fact, we're live streaming today. So if you want to be a part of something really cool, definitely subscribe to this channel and come back a little later today to watch those live streams. And we also have a backlog. We have maybe 50 or 60 episodes that we've done in the past where, again, we talk about all things Atlassian. So check that one out. And also check out my main YouTube channel, Tech Tutorials, where I have 600 videos that showing you how to use Jira. So if you want to take this to the next level, you definitely want to scan that QR code and go check out those other channels. All right. So that's it for that. Let's just jump into the Jira navigation. I'm not a big fan of PowerPoint, so this is about as far as we're going to go with the PowerPoint. We're going to get on out of here. We're going to just jump into Jira. This is really just here to make sure that I stay somewhat focused, because I can talk about Jira for hours and hours and hours, and we only have 55 minutes, 54 minutes. So let's just jump into it. Okay. So a couple of just, I guess, level setting information so that you're aware. This is in the cloud. So all the UI and everything we're going to be talking about is primarily for the cloud, but a lot of it does apply if you're in a data center. But because anyone and everyone around the world, hopefully, fingers crossed, can get access to Jira Cloud, we try to focus on Jira Cloud since data center is really reserved for, enterprises and big customers of Atlassian. But we're going to be focusing on the cloud. That's number one. And number two, keep in mind that based on when you're watching this, as of, April 29th, 2024, Atlassian will be revamping their UI. They've already introduced some changes that are going to be rolling out over the next few months. So again, depending on when you watch this replay, this UI may look drastically different. So keep that in mind. All right. With that said, let's just get started at the top. So I like to start top left corner. We have this little app switcher here. This app switcher here is really cool. It's really interesting because what it lets you do is it lets you change from the products that you and your company are subscribed to. These are the products that you pay for. As you can see, there is a long list of different products that Atlassian makes. So Jira is just one of them. And as you can see, we can see that service management, that work management, Confluence, Compass. You and your company might not have all of these, so you might not see these. But the reason I start here and the reason I think this is important is because unlike other applications, Jira is 100% web-based. And so some people usually tend to bookmark their pages so that they know where their Confluence is, where their Jira is, where their Bitbucket is. And that's cool. You can definitely do that. Or in case you didn't know, you can click on this little grid. And again, whatever you have access to, whatever you have a license to, you're able to see them here and click on them and just jump into them really, really easily. What's more important though, if you have a sandbox, I'm going to come over here. Let me see if I can find one with a sandbox here. Of course, I'm not able to find one. But if you have a sandbox, you will also see this little black arrow that lets you change. So you can actually change between your production instance and your sandbox instance. So again, so that way you don't have to be bookmarking URLs. You can navigate to any and all products that you have access to from within the Atlassian ecosystem just from this little grid. And you may be wondering, what the heck are all these colorful letters over here? Well, in the cloud, you may have access to multiple Jiras, not just the sandbox, but multiple URLs, unique URLs here. And mostly for enterprise customers, you have the ability to essentially have more than one Jira. And so if you click on this little grid, each one of these is a different URL, or AKA another instance of the product. So these are just all the ones I have access to, a lot, but you may only have one or two. It just depends on who and where you are at. So that's what the little grid is for. Love it. Get to use it. Again, it just saves you from having to bookmark. It saves you from having to remember where the URLs are, where things are. It just lets you change the applications really, really quickly. Next up is the little Jira button. This is customizable for whatever you and your company want, but it will just take you back to your homepage. So if I click on it, it's just going to take me back here to the main landing page, which is my Your Work page. So again, this is customizable. The where it goes to is customizable, and how it looks is customizable. So you can put your company logo or something like that here. But let's get started with Your Work. This is really where the fun begins. So one of the important things I should say about Jira is that Jira is a tool that allows teams to collaborate together. Okay, it allows teams to assign work. So if Rodney and I here, the voice, who's again in the chat here answering questions and starting things and dropping information, but if him and I, if we have to work on something and I have to assign work to him, well, Jira is the tool that we're going to use. And in Jira, because it's such a big behemoth of a tool, it can become very easy for you to lose where things are at, and specifically the stuff that you're assigned to. And so your work, in my opinion, especially as a beginner, is the most critical thing that you should know if you learn anything over the next 15 minutes here, is that your work is always going to be like your center. It's where you come to figure out what you are responsible for. And so as long as somebody has assigned something to you, which means you are now accountable, which means you're now technically you have to deliver this, right? Well, have to is a strong word, but this is not your responsibility, right? And so anything that you're responsible for, things that you should be accountable for, things that somebody's depending on you to complete in order to move the project forward, um, this right here is where you're going to find that. So you're going to see that under your work, you have an assigned to me, and anything that, regardless of what status it's in, because it's going to break it up in statuses for you, it's going to show up here. So this is something, if I was again a new person, this is something that I'm checking almost every single day, especially first thing I'm doing when I'm logging in is just to make sure, do I have anything new that was assigned to me while I was asleep? Because believe it or not, that happens quite often. So definitely check these out. This is the one place that I would start. Now, as we move our way down the list here, we have recents. Now, Jira is a little nosy. Jira likes to keep track of us and what we're doing. And if you touch, which means I open an issue, and we'll talk about what an issue is in a little bit later. But if you open something up and you start typing into it, maybe you edit, maybe you add a comment, maybe you add something to the description, right? Maybe you change the status, right? You are working on these items. And when you work on them, Jira is going to remember that you actually made a change, and it's going to put it in this worked on section. So again, you do need to physically do something interactive with Jira in order for something to show up here. But these are not something that you need to be assigned to. So you don't necessarily need to be assigned to something. You can definitely just be collaborating with someone else and it will show up here. The view down here, though, this section is now Jira being super nosy. So just by you looking, right? If you're just looking, yes, while here says the all CNI, right? So just by you looking at something, it's going to show up in the viewed. So if you are ever trying to just jog your memory and go, I know I did something, I know I commented on something, or I know I was looking at a filter or a board, like where was it? Just come here and it's going to show it to you. Now, the next one is boards. So we'll talk about boards in a second, but just know that you can start your boards here and you can very easily get to your boards. And this is critical because boards are not always easy to get back to. There is a difference between a board and a project, which we're going to talk about in a second here. But just know that this board section is very, very helpful, especially since you can star your boards, which means you can basically bookmark them and they'll always like be locked here so you can find your boards easier. You don't have to worry about queues or alerts because those are different Jiras. Definitely not in scope for this project. But I do want to talk about this main page. So you notice that when I go to your work and if I go back to your assigned to me, you're going to see this go to your work page, which is this big page that you're seeing on my screen. And this basically just shows you everything that I just showed you in this drop down with one little exception. It shows you your starred. So each of these, you have the ability for some of these actually, just for the boards really, you have the ability to add stars, but you can actually add stars to filters, to dashboards, to projects. You can star a couple different things. And when you put the little star, and so let me just show you, right? When you put like a little star like this, they will then show up in this start section. So this is kind of like one of the benefits that you get from being in this main page is that you'll see everything you've bookmarked from across. Now, let's move on down to projects. So the projects here, if you click on view all projects, this is going to show you all the projects that you have access to. If you don't have access to a project, it will not show up on here. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the project doesn't exist. It just means that you don't have access to it. So keep that in mind when you're looking at this here. It's not that, again, not that the project doesn't exist. It's just if you don't see something and your team maybe gave you a link or you've seen the project when somebody else was sharing their screen or something like that, it just means that you just don't have access to it. But if you click on this projects, view all projects, you will see all the projects that you have access to. Any projects that you're just accessing because you're just clicking into them, they're going to show up here. And if you bookmark them, if you put the little star, they're going to show up on the top. Now, everybody sees this create project, and depending on how your Atlassian administrator has configured this, you may be able to create team managed projects, which we'll get into in a couple minutes, or you may not, nothing will happen. And so just really depends on how your administrator has configured your Jira. Out of the box, just as a spoiler, out of the box, anybody can create team managed projects. I typically come in and turn that off real quickly because creating a project or a project in Jira is very, very intentional. Again, we're going to jump into it deeper here in the second half of the presentation here. But creating projects is something that shouldn't be just done willy-nilly. There should be some thought. There should be some structure, some intent into when you create a project. And it shouldn't just be like, oh, because I'm going to do a release or something, right? Like there's a purpose for this, which we'll talk about in a second here. As we go down to filters and dashboards, I need to actually skip this part and take you all the way to the right side of Jira, because over here on the right side is a search button. And this search button lets me basically search for anything inside of Jira. As long as there's data in Jira in some sort of in any issue in a field, and as long as I have access to it, I can search for it. So Jira's search capabilities are very, very powerful. But what makes Jira searches powerful and valuable is that when you look for something, you're probably going to go look for that similar data tomorrow and the day after and the week after and the month later. And so rather than doing these searches every single time and having to always, drop the filters or the criteria and just figure out what your search is, you can save it. And you can save these searches as filters. And when you do that, when you save your searches as filters, then they show up over here on your filters. And these are shareable. So you can share them with people, and they're basically repeatable, right? Because it's always the same criteria every single time. So if I click on one of these, it's always going to have these values automatically set to whatever I save the filter to. So again, this is valuable for two reasons. One, you can share this with anybody in your organization. So you're looking at the same data set. And two, oh boy, it's always the same data, right? It's always the same data that the filter is always going to default back to whatever that criteria was. So you're not having to remember, did I bring this value in? Was this the condition, right? It's always the same conditions, the same criteria, the same filter, same data, so that you can always reliably have like that baseline, because this is very critical. If you miss something here, it'll completely change the results, right? It'll alter the data. So you want to be very careful. And filters basically help give you that integrity of your data. So filters are very powerful. When you create filters, this is what they look like. It's basically like an Excel sheet inside of Jira. But then we have dashboards. And dashboards allow us to visualize the data. So I can take any data that I've saved and I can now make it a little bit more metric-like. Again, filters and dashboards are a little bit more advanced. They're definitely beyond just the beginner. So in the chat here, if metrics and reporting is something that's interesting to you inside of Jira, maybe just JQL tips, let us know in the chat. We are, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are finishing up June, right? June is going to be the last of these sessions. But as we start preparing for July and beyond, we are currently actively evaluating what topics should we talk about. And so if JQL, and then, so a little joke here, JQL, JQuil, depending on how you want to call it. I personally like JQuil, right? But if you are interested in those kind of classes, do please let us know in the chat here so that we can accommodate and make more advanced courses for you as well. All right, beyond JQuil, we have Teams. So Atlassian is doing some cool stuff here. I'm not quite ready to talk about this just yet, but just know that Teams is something that is cross-product. So if you remember over here when we're looking at all these different products, Atlassian is making some major strides. It's not there yet. It's not there 100%, but they are making some some big efforts to basically unify your teams across all the different products so that you can work better as a team. So more on that later. Again, it's like 90, 95% ready, but it's still not ready for me to to be preaching it or promoting it. So we're just going to skip over that. Plans is something that you have only if you're a premium or enterprise customer. And so since this is for beginners, plans is definitely, like I would say, one of the more advanced topics and one of the more advanced utilizations of Jira. So we're definitely not going to talk about it here, but it's very similar to the JQuil or JQL, right? If you're interested in learning more about what is more commonly known as advanced roadmaps or the Jira advanced roadmaps, let me know. Sorry, let me take some water here. Let me know because, again, this can be a class by itself. Assets is the JSM thing, so we're going to skip over that. And I will very briefly mention apps. So one of the best things and one of the worst things about Jira is that while Jira is very powerful, it's awesome, it's very limited still. And so through these apps, there's an entire marketplace. Think about it like the Android Play Store or the iOS store on your phones, where you can download apps for your phones, right? And so this is very similar, where developers around the world, they basically extend the powers of Jira through apps. And so these most of the time are paid. So you typically have to go through hoops if you're working in an enterprise environment to get these approved or bought or purchased or whatever you need to do to get them added to your Jira. But most of them are paid, but they do significantly expand the power of Jira. Again, more of an advanced topic. We don't really talk about it here, but for all these items that we've talked about here, plans, filters, dashboards, I want to take you back to this QR code, because if you go to my YouTube channel, and I'll just kind of just open it up here, right? So if you go back to ATech here, tech tutorials, not that I'm trying to turn this into a sales pitch, but if you go to my main channel here, ATech Tech Tutorials, and you go to the live section, you're going to find just how to do pretty much all that stuff. So if you don't want to wait until we make more content for you, you got the reports here. We got JQuil tips. We got advanced roadmap that we're just talking about, right? So lots and lots of videos here, all live streams. So they're all about an hour long, that basically walk you through what you need to know to take your skills to the next level. Again, all free, and that'll kind of take you down that rabbit hole if you're interested in that. Okay, so with that said, that basically covers our navigation, except for one critical thing that I've left off, which is this create button. And so this create button is what's going to basically transition us into this next half of the course of what do we use Jira for, right? What is Jira for, right? Like, so Jira is used to, as I mentioned a little while ago, right? It's designed so that in a collaborative environment, specifically one of Agile, although Atlassian's kind of changing their Agile narrative here, and you'll see when the next version of Jira drops, it's going to be a lot less Agile-like, right? But with respect to Agile today, we have epics and stories and all this kind of work that we want to track, right? So if you're an Agile organization, and you're working again off of sprints, or you're working in a Kanban way, you most likely have some sort of an epic, a story, and a task type of situation, maybe some bugs, right? And so Jira is really designed to capture this kind of work, and everything's captured when we hit this create button. When we hit this create button, we're able to take something, some task, some item that somebody in your team needs to do, whether that be a story as in your development, or whether it be fixing something like a bug, right? Jira is going to be our vessel. It's going to be the tool that we use to essentially create and capture that work. Okay. Now, Jira, I think Ronnie here has a very interesting thing here. What no PIs, right? So product program increments is a very safe term. And Jira today, at least in the current incarnation, is not really designed for scaled agile, right? So you won't see anything like PIs today, but there are ways to hack Jira, which again is much more advanced course than anything I can teach in an hour. But there are Jira, I think, while here captures it very nicely, right? Like you literally can do anything you want in Jira, you just got to know how to do it. But for beginners, way out of our league, right? We don't need to be worrying about any PIs or any heavy customizations. We just need to know that if we're an agile team, an agile organization, and for that matter, you don't need to be agile, but it does help, right? Because out of the box, if I open up one of these projects at random here, we're going to have tasks. We're going to have epics. We're going to have stories. These are the default settings that Jira ships with, and they just coincide with Agile. Okay. But when we create something, when we hit this create button up here, which by the way is everywhere, right? That create button follows you everywhere, right? We need to put things into a location, and that location is the project. So we're going to transition here a little bit, and we're going to go talk about projects, right? And I'm going to take you down this road of what exactly is a project, how you should be thinking about projects, and the major impact and role that projects play in your organization. So first, I'm going to start off with just some basics, right? And I'm not seeing any questions. I think we have a one question started. Jan here, he's definitely interested in setting up dashboards and JQL. So we hear you loud and clear. We'll take that feedback right back up to Atlassian, and we'll see what we can do there. But dashboards and JQuil are definitely something that we will be working on, Jan. So, okay. So anyways, so back to projects, since I didn't see any other. Again, take a second here. We are like at the halfway point. So if you want to ask any questions about anything I've talked about, feel free to drop them here in the chat. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button just yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. All right. So projects. Let's talk about projects. Okay. So in Jira, we have a lot of different project templates. And Atlassian invests a lot into making a lot of templates. I don't particularly agree with that narrative because as an admin, I'm 99% of the time, I usually modify the templates. So I end up having to scrape or just redo a lot of what the templates are. But the templates are great when you don't have a Jira admin. Fortunately, for a lot of companies, at least the power users of Jira, they are going to have a Jira admin. And so this is a little bit less valuable at that point because your Jira admin is going to help. They're like an artist. They're going to help you craft your project the way you want it. But Atlassian, because they are trying to appeal to a general audience, right? They're trying to appeal to everybody, right? They want people off of Monday. They want people off of Asana. They want people off of um, what else is out there? ClickUp, right? We don't like those tools. Those are words that we don't use in our Atlassian community, right? And because of that, we Atlassian is trying to make this easier, right? They want that barrier to entry to be as minimal as humanly possible. And so Atlassian gives you a bunch of different templates for a bunch of different purposes. Okay. But because we are talking about Jira Software, I'm going to click over here on Jira Software. And our list of templates goes from a lot. You'll notice that I was scrolling up and down. I can't scroll anymore. And with respect to software, there's really only two. Because these three down here, I don't know why Atlassian throws them in here. They shouldn't be in here. This is only for premium users. So again, very much an advanced feature. This is for product discovery, which really goes under product management. Shouldn't even be in Jira Software. And the bug tracking, in my opinion, is useless. I think Atlassian just keeps onto it for heritage, because if you don't know the history of Jira, it started off as a bug tracker. And so I think they keep that there just for that reminder, that gentle reminder of where their heritage is. But 99.9999999% of Jira Software projects, they're going to be Kanban or Scrum, and that's it. So we're going to be focusing on one of these two configurations here. And specifically, I'm going to focus on Scrum, because Scrum, if you want the full effect, if you're buying Jira, if your company is buying Jira for the first time, and you're reading the marketing material, Scrum is the template that you want so that you can do all the things in the marketing material. Because if you don't, if you pick anything else, literally anything else, you will not get the full effect of Jira. You have to pick the Scrum template in order to get that full effect. Andy's over here pulling the Ali G with 99.99 there. Yeah. I'm just trying to drive a point home, Andy. I am just trying to make sure that people understand why we picked this Scrum template, okay? All right. So once we're in Scrum, this is going to be essentially, Jira is going to be configured for us so that we can practice Agile. So as you can see, Agile or Scrum is an Agile term. And so this is where like the Agile and Jira start combining, right? And so what is with this template here. Now you as a Jira Software user, you may not care, right? Or let me rephrase, you may not even have the ability to create projects. So this is more of a situational awareness. So you understand the backstory. The underlying foundation of how and why Jira behaves the way it does is because of this particular template. But your Jira admin, you definitely want to connect with your Jira admin so you make sure you get these set up correctly. Now, when you click on this, when we pick Scrum and we click on this use template, we're going to be greeted with this differences between a purple and a blue, team managed and company managed. And you've heard me say team managed already in this presentation. And team manage is basically, again, Atlassian trying to drastically lower that barrier to entry, right? They want anybody, just anybody, right, at any skill level to be able to do a couple of clicks and jump into Jira and be ready to roll. This is great when you're a team of like 5, 8, 10 people. The moment that you become an enterprise, the moment you scale and you have 2, 3, 4, 5 different teams, 50 different teams, 100 different teams, this purple just cripples itself. It completely handicaps your experience with Jira. So whenever possible, if you know you're going to be working in a large company with multiple teams and you have a dedicated Jira admin, always go blue, because the blue is going to unlock all the power of Jira. The purple is going to give you just enough Jira to be dangerous, but you will outgrow it. Guarantee you will outgrow a team managed project. So always go blue if you can do it, because it's just gonna always just gonna give you. It's basically like turning off traction control on a Ferrari, right? This is just gonna let you go crazy and do everything. So I'm gonna pick team managed, and then you give it a name. Now I'm not gonna actually create a project here because I don't need to. I have a project already. But that's essentially how we get here in this list of projects. So at some point, somebody in your organization, specifically Jira admin, may have created all these projects for you. So when you're using Jira, you're interacting with Jira, you need to pick a project. Everything going forward happens inside of a project. And so you just have to pick one. So I'm just going to pick this April Kanban demo here. And hopefully I haven't contaminated this one with modifications to the settings. But once we're in a project, this is where the magic happens, right? So everything I've led up to the first 30 minutes is to kind of just build up to this. We're in a project, and I like to call my projects a house, because everything that we're going to do now revolves around this house. So Wayne here has a question. How do we tell if a project is Kanban or Agile? So great question, Wayne. And so what you can do, couple of indicators, 3 indicators that I'm going to give to you to be aware of, okay? Number 1, here, this will tell you if you're a software project, a service project, a product management project, a work management project. This is going to change. So this will tell you which of these categories was selected. So that's the first indicator for you to see, because again, if you're an agile team, and I do want to be very careful here. I'm using the word agile because Kanban and Scrum are 2 different forms of agile, but they're both software and they're both agile in a nutshell. Right, so you do want to check, are you software first of all, because if this doesn't say software, you're not getting a Kanban, you're not getting a Scrum board, so you're not going to get the agileness. So if you are an agile team and you want an agile project, you must first of all be in a software project. Number 2, you want to look down here. So I'm going to remove your comment here, and I'm going to move me out of the way for 1 second. And so you're looking at this bottom left corner. We're looking, are we company or team? Again, team will work. Not trying to be Ali G again, right? But team will work that 90% of the time. But whenever you're trying to scale, you really do want to be company managed. So I always recommend company managed projects here. So check for that. Because if you're finding frustration or limits with Jira, it's most likely that this says team. And if it says team, this is where you're going to want to call me and I'll help you out. Bring some money though. Okay. And then the next part to actually answer your question though, how do we know if we're Agile or Scrum or if we're Kanban? Jira will tell us. So here, as you can see, we're in a Kanban board because it tells us Kanban. Okay. This is a key indicator. This will say the word Kanban. If I switch over to, oh boy, I don't always have these ready, right? But if I switch over to a Scrum project, you will notice that it says active sprint. And so that is the biggest difference. The biggest indicator that tells me whether I'm Scrum or Kanban is because that particular word is going to be different. But the behavior, I should warn you, is pretty much, I wouldn't say the same, but very, very similar. Okay. So now that we're in the project, I'm just going to jump back into my April Kanban demo here, just to kind of actually, to not be hypocritical. Let's just stick with the Scrum demo, right? Because I want to teach you Scrum, right? I had said that Scrum is the way to go if you want it all. So let me kind of walk you through the navigation here. I'm going to walk you through what a project is, and then we're going to start putting things into Jira, and then we're going to use it, and then we're going to wrap it up. So let's go a little bit faster because I am running out of time here. So we are in a software project, right? I already covered this. We have a board. What exactly is a board? So let's talk about boards for a second. So think of a project, like I mentioned earlier, as a house. So if we were to take a house, right, you got four walls and a roof, hopefully, right? I'll constitute that as a house, right? But inside that house, you usually have a room, right? And I want you to think of a board, right? When we see here, there's clearly the word board here. A board is a room inside of that house. And this is very critical because a lot of people will interchange project and board. And most of the time, that's okay because out of the box, a board takes up the entire project or the entire house. Okay. And so it's a one to one. By default, when you create a project, you're going to get a board, and that board is going to say, hey, I'm going to show you. This is what I'm clicking. You don't need to worry about this part, but I'm just going to show you evidence, right? Jira is going to say, hey, this board, as you can see, I'm in the settings for the board. Whatever issues are in this project, in this house, I want to see them. Okay. And for most of you, this is fine. And this is why you're allowed to do that interchangeability between a project and a board, because technically they do mean the same thing as a beginner. But in these company managed projects, you can actually have multiple boards inside of a project. And so once you start getting a little bit more advanced, once you start really, getting real expert level here with Jira, that statement of the project equals the board doesn't always apply. So that's why I like to tell people, like, think of the board as a room, because you are allowed to have multiple rooms inside of your house, right? And so think of the house though as the project, and the boards are just going to be different rooms inside that house. Now, the other thing for you to consider now is issues, the work, right? The tasks that we're going to be tracking. So think of those as furniture, right? Because certain furniture goes in certain rooms, and so Jira is going to basically work around that concept a lot. Now, Ronnie says, can you have multiple houses inside of a room? No, but you can have a neighborhood. So you can create multiple houses. So this right here is your neighborhood. So when you look at the list of all projects, every one of these projects is a house. Okay. And there's a section, I haven't done it in this particular instance, but there's a category. You can actually group these projects together and really like carve out your neighborhood. So you can have a neighborhood for IT help desk projects. You can have a neighborhood for a bunch of different things. Um, let's see. Let me clarify. Can you have a board with multiple projects in it? Okay. Yes. That is a whole different question, Mr. Rodney. One that I would have expected better from the Jira guy. So going back, so Ronnie's asking, okay, so it's a one-to-one configuration, right? When I told you that in here, you basically say where the source of the issues are coming from. Usually anything that's in that project will show up in that board. As Rodney here is asking, can you basically add projects to this query, to this list here? And the answer is yes, right? So I can go in and pull issues from anywhere. They can live in any project, and I'm basically like connecting houses together at this point, and I'm referencing furniture from different houses, and I'm taking them to be my own. This is a very advanced thing in Jira. Well, I wouldn't say very, but it is a more advanced thing in Jira. I wouldn't recommend you start there off. Like, definitely consult with someone like Release Team or one of these marketplace partners that can guide you and coach you through this correct configuration. Because in a hurry, Jira can get very complicated, and pulling in issues from multiple projects is like the next step of increasing the complexity of Jira, but one that is sometimes very needed because sometimes you have different teams living in different houses that need to work together in a unified place. So that's what the boards are for. Sean says, how do you know if a project is Kanban or Agile? If it's on a roll, it's Kanban. If it's sprinting, it's Agile. Some good humor here this morning. Thank you, Sean, for that. That needs to go on a t-shirt. Okay. So anyway, so that's our board, right? So within our board, we have a couple of different items. And so we're going to spend a minute here just talking about those items. So we have a timeline, which we're going to come back and revisit, right? But this timeline gives us kind of like a Gantt looking chart view. One quick thing to know, this is also referred to as a basic timeline. And this is critical that I make this indication because a basic timeline will only work if the filter that we were looking at just a minute ago only has one project. Because the moment you pull in multiple projects, Jira is going to give you a big giant X and go, that doesn't work. So this is again where you need to now be a premium customer, because now we got to go to an advanced timeline in order to pull in sources from different projects. But just keeping things simple, you just one-to-one, folks, just one-to-one, just one project, one board. Life's going to be easy for you. But if you do need, again, some complexity, because businesses are complex, definitely reach out to someone like me or someone like Release Team, who's on the call here to help you out, and they'll walk you through your coaching for a fee, of course, but somebody's on your side. Okay, so we have a timeline, which again we're going to come back and revisit. We have a backlog. Kanbans don't have a backlog by default. We can add it. Let me rephrase. Kanban boards will not have this dedicated backlog section here. They do have a backlog. It's not explicitly stated here on the left. You can and have the ability to add it to a Kanban board, but by default, if you are on a Kanban team, you might not see this backlog. But I highly recommend you enable it, because it makes life way, way easier. Okay, so we'll talk about backlogs again here in a minute. And then we have an active sprint. And so the active sprint is basically the board. This is what we traditionally know as a board, right? And this is where we can visualize the stories, the tasks, and the bugs and subtasks. Not epics though. No epics in your Scrum board. Kanban though, again, man, this thing gets really complicated real fast. But Kanban will let you see epics. Scrum is usually stories down. Okay. And we'll come back and talk about what this all happens, or how this all works, in a second. We then have reports. So as you use Jira, Jira's tracking things, right? It's watching, as we looked at earlier, and you get these reports to kind of measure progress. Now, everything here, I'm going to go back to my project here. All these 4 sections here are unique to the board. So as I change boards and as I change projects, the data changes. So keep that in mind. Goals is something that Atlassian is introducing and pushing as of late. Today, it's connected with Atlas. It's a different product, as you can see here, powered by Atlas. But in the future, this is all just going to be mingled into the Jira project. So keep an eye out for that. Issues. This is very important. This is something that I want. If you're taking notes down, this is very, very critical. These are the stuff. So an issue, if we haven't caught on by now, it's that work item. It's that epic or that story, that bug, that task, that subtask. It's whatever you create, whatever you hit this create button up here, it's in the project, right? Issues always live in the project. They don't live in the board. The board references, they point to issues. And this is very critical, because when you're in your backlog, you're going to notice that I have 4, 5, 6 issues in my backlog. As you can see here, I have 4 here and 2 here. But when I click on issues, you'll notice that I have 9. So where's the delta? Why is there a difference, right? Well, the board is designed, a couple of things that you need to know. The board, or the backlog, is designed to show you whatever's in that filter, right? So if something doesn't meet the qualifications of that filter, it's not going to show up. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist in the project, okay? Second thing you need to know, that the board is forward-looking, present and forward-looking, okay? And what that means is that the board is really designed to show you things that are not done. So as soon as something goes to done, and as soon as you complete a sprint or you release your board, those issues disappear. They don't get deleted, but they disappear. But they will always be here in the issues. So just keep that in mind, that this confuses a lot of beginners, because the board shows you different data intentionally, right? Not to mess with you, not to make it harder, but because the board is really focused on what are we working on today and forward. The issues here on the left-hand side just shows you everything. Things from 6 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it'll all be here, right? But the board is only going to show you that current, basically unresolved work that hasn't been completed with a close sprint yet. So Promote asks here, what other issue types in Jira, and where can I get all this info about? So by default, these are the issues, right? This is what you have to worry about. Again, this is the Jira Software Beginners course. This is all you should need to worry about. You can essentially create anything you want. If you look at this other one I have over here, you'll notice that I have more things. I have an improvement, I have an initiative, I have defects. A Jira administrator has the ability to add anything they want, whatever the company wants. There is literally no limit there. Okay. Now, this is a way more advanced topic, right? This is again where you want to consult with someone like me or someone from like release team here, because there's some coaching, right? You just shouldn't just create things to create things because you can, right? There should be a method to the madness. And usually you want an expert here to guide you and coach you, because it's very easy for you to just, screw yourself over in Jira. So definitely, I would say this is an advanced topic, and definitely check out. I do have in my videos over here. I should have one on issue types. We just gotta find it, but I'm pretty sure somewhere in here I have an issue type one. So if it's not in the live, definitely check out the videos. But I definitely, I'm pretty sure I have an issue type video in here. So go look for that. But yeah, okay. So that basically explains the issues. Components, I wouldn't worry about too much right now, but components is basically just a sticker you put on the issues to categorize them or label them. Code, advanced topic here, really for developers, but you are allowed to connect to Bitbucket or GitHub or GitLab or Azure DevOps, although GitHub and Bitbucket are the two best ones that Jira works with the best. It will work with everything else, but Bitbucket and GitHub, that's where it shines. And so if you're a developer, if you're a company writing code, highly recommend you leverage this. Then we got releases. So this is more for like the project management side of the house, but this is again just another categorization, another labeling that you can put the work, all the stuff. You can't boil the ocean. You can't work on everything all at the same time. So these these issues here, these releases here will help you, put things into categories so that order of operations, which work needs to be worked on first because you have a release coming up. So again, more of an advanced topic. Project pages are connections to Confluence, whole separate project or whole separate discussion. We do have, if you look at back in the live learning section in Atlassian, if you look over here, we'll just go to ACE, right? If you go to the live learning here, I'll just drop a link real quick in the chat here, basically where you sign up for this class. We do have Confluence and a bunch of different other information, right? So my good buddy here, Robert Heem, he does the Confluence stuff. So if you're interested in Confluence, go check that one out. But we can connect Jira with Confluence. Assets, again, out of scope. Shortcuts are just links to other websites, other things that you want. And then the project settings. This is, I think this warrants enough of a project administrator course, but all these settings are somewhat configurable. And definitely not in scope for this because this is a little bit more of an advanced topic. So with that said, now you kind of know how a project is configured or the layout. Let's get into the details, right? In the next 3 to 5 minutes, I'm going to show you everything you need to know to actually use Jira, because everything else that I've covered for the last 47 minutes is really like a backstory, right? It's a foundation for you to understand how and why Jira behaves the way it's going to behave. And I'm just going to show you how this works right now in a second, okay? So I will pause here for some questions, though, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Any questions from anyone? And then let me just check my notes. So we covered that. We are going to talk about this, and we already covered the board. So I really have these out of order. And so we're going to create and edit issues, and then we'll wrap things up in the last 5 minutes. So any questions? Now is the time to ask in the chat. Ronnie here says, even though it's called a release, you don't have to use it strictly as that. You can just use it. Yeah. So definitely just use it as an organizational item. So here comes the juice. Yes, definitely. So we're going to get started here. We do have 3 questions. Okay, so best cert to acquire if someone's been managing their own project in Jira for 2 years. Ronnie, help me out with this one because I'm not familiar with all the certs yet, but I'm thinking there's a 120 or a 420 or something like that that I think would be the recommended one. Oh, speak up.
Oh, you're going to put me on spot. I see how it is.
Yes, you're the is it the 420 or the 120?
Probably choose the 420 first, especially if you've been doing an ITSM project. If you've been doing Scrum projects, I look at the 120, but also look at anything ACA.
Great tip there. I'll remove you. All right. Is it true that once you pick the template, you can't change it? Yes. So once you pick a template, you're basically stuck with that. You'll have to delete the project or just create a new project.
Caveat.
Little star, little asterisk.
You can't change the template, but you can customize the project from that point on.
Not only that, but then you can also pick, you can have both Scrum and Kanban boards in there. So you can have a hybrid. Not recommended, but definitely allowable. You can change pretty much everything and anything. The only thing you can't do, right, though, like if you pick a software project, you can't make it a Jira work management template. Like that's just not going to work. You can't make it a JSM template either, right? But everything else, like once you do pick software, whether you want to be Kanban or Agile, the workflow, all of that is manipulable and configurable. So technically you can change it, but you can't change between products. So you either have a software template or a service management template or a work management template, and that's it. There's like, you can't shift that around. All right. Andy says technology. What is that all about? About his okay. So I think we're good here. So let's just jump into it. We got 5 minutes. Literally in 5 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how to use Jira. All you got to do, like literally, Jira is like the easiest thing to use once you know all the other stuff I just taught you, right? So step number one, the create button. This is how you get things into Jira. So most of the time, you're going to be in some sort of an agile-like world. So you're going to be creating a story, a task, an epic, or a bug. Those are the defaults. Again, we can get way more complex, but for the concepts of beginners, this is what you get. So I'm just going to create a story. Now, when I create a story, you're going to notice that there's fields down here. So this is the data that I want to collect. Everything is optional unless it has a little red star. This is configurable by your admin. So in this particular case, I'm just going to go, this is my story, exclamation mark. Everything else, as you can see here, does not have a red star. So I don't have to provide information. A good Jira admin will find the right balance of what's required and what's not required. Because if you make too many fields required, nobody's going to put things into Jira. And if you don't put enough fields required, then you're going to get garbage into Jira. So there's a beautiful, delicate balance that you and your team need to find together. And so this is my description. Okay, so once you do that, I'm going to hit create. And you'll notice that that issue that I just created doesn't show up on my board. And that is because the fundamentals of Scrum is different than like that of Kanban. And so what makes Scrum unique is that your board shows you an active sprint, which means that you have blocked. You have literally created these blinders, filters, blinders. I think blinders. You've created these blinders. Sorry, having an existential crisis here. You create these blinders here so that you don't see the noise outside your sprint. Your backlog, though, doesn't have those blinders. So this story that I just created is just in the bottom of the backlog. And so whenever you create anything in Jira, it's going to, specifically a story, task, or bug, it's automatically going to go to the bottom of your backlog. And so with that said, I can also click on this create issue button here and go, this is my second story. You'll notice that it defaults to a bug, so be careful. Change it to a story, hit enter, and now I have a second story. So there's a couple of different ways to put things into Jira. You can either go straight to the backlog, you can hit the create button, okay? Now, what you'll notice though is that both of these items, these two stories that I created, they're what I call orphans, blinders. Thank you, Sean. I don't know what I would do without you, okay? So these stories are cool, but they're orphans, right? What's the purpose of the story? How do these stories associate to the big picture? Well, that's what we have epics, right? And so depending on where you subscribe to your Agile Digest, there's going to be different philosophies for this. So I'm not going to get too much into the politics of it, right? But just know that having these stories is great. Awesome. We can work with the story. But if you want to take your stories and give them a little bit more purpose, my best practice is to associate them to an epic. So how do we create an epic? Well, over here, when we hit the create button, we simply choose an epic instead, right? But now we're working backwards, right? We have the answer, the story, and we're going up a level. I don't like going that way. I like working top down. So the timeline view is a phenomenal view to create, like, this is my first epic, hit enter, right? And so this will create the epic, just like if I hit the create button over here and change it to epic, okay? But what I like about this view is that there's a little plus sign here that I can click on, and I can go like third epic, or third story, and fourth story, right? And when I do that, when I hit these buttons, when I just very quickly create these stories, two things are happening. One, they're automatically associated to my epic. This is nice from an organization perspective. And number two, they're automatically added to the bottom of my backlog. but you'll notice that they have a color, right? Notice that the two that I created earlier don't have an epic, but these two do. So again, it just gives it purpose. It's just a way to categorize your work, because when you're looking, it's easy. We have 6 issues here, but in your backlog, you usually have hundreds and hundreds of issues. And when you're trying to figure out, what do I work on next, or what should be worked on next, the epics and the releases, again, this is a lot more advanced, so we won't get into those details, but the fields here will help guide you. They will help you figure out what should be worked on next. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete a sprint here, because I want an empty sprint. Because the next step that I want to show you is that once you have your backlog, right, one of the activities that your Scrum Masters, product owners should be doing is they should be grooming this backlog. They should be creating the work. Usually, as an end user, you're not creating stories or tasks, right? There's usually somebody up above is creating a lot of this. You might have some influence, you might have some information to provide, but usually it's not the case, right? But once you have this done, right, your backlog's groomable, rankable, sorry, which means that I can move things up and down, and Jira is going to remember the order. Okay, this is important. Again, not something that most folks are using, but if you're a Scrum Master, you definitely want to like maybe take a Scrum Master or how to use Jira for Scrum Masters course that I actually offer for this. Okay, but once you have your stories in play, the next thing you need to do, and then, again, this may be not you as a user, but maybe your Scrum Master, is they're moving them into the sprints. And so up here, you can see that I have this gray. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a gray box here that it basically dictates my sprint. And so I can bring in this work that I just created, and I put it into a sprint. And what happens in here is you can assign the work to somebody. You can estimate the work using story points. So each one of these, I can give it a number, right? And again, we won't get into the logistics of like how many points should something get. So I'm just going to randomly put in numbers, because at a very minimum, you should never, ever, ever hit the start sprint button without estimating first. Because if you hit the start sprint button and you haven't done the story points like I'm doing here, Jira's reports will not look good for you. So you always want to make sure at a minimum you have numbers and all these little bubbles. And if you don't have the bubbles, guess what? You're in a Kanban board, because Kanban doesn't have the concept of a story point. And so if you don't see the bubbles, check over here. I'm willing to bet a lot of money you're in a Kanban board, not a Scrum board. Okay. And so in Scrum, we give the estimate. Optionally, you can assign it. I recommend you assign it, because when you assign the issues to somebody, this will populate for you, and you can see capacity and velocity. So this is kind of neat. But once you're ready, you start your sprint. Okay. You give it a name, you put some dates, you hit start. Apparently, you got to be in the future here. You hit start. Usually a 2-week sprint is what I recommend. But once you hit that, then comes what you're going to do 99% of the time, which is you now, as a user of Jira, take whatever's assigned to you. You can click on your little icon here. It'll hide everything else, so you just see your stuff. And when you start working on something, you move it to in progress. And when you're done, you move it to done. And that's it. You just literally, this is right here in the fundamental. This is how you use Jira. You take whatever's assigned to you, you move it to in progress when you're working on it. And when you're done, you move it to done. And really, it's the critical part. This is really the part that almost everybody drops or forgets, because Jira is useless if you don't update the statuses. And I think Ronnie has a shirt that says, have you updated your Jira status today, right? Because this is what we talk about when we say update Jira. And it's literally updating the status. And there's 2 ways to do it, right? Like you can do the drag and drop, which I like, kind of fun. Or you can do a drop down here and pick to do or done and move it around. Now, this is all configurable. Again, you're going to want to talk to your Jira admin or somebody like Relief Team or someone like me to help you out. But this is essentially in a nutshell. Your objective is when somebody assigns something to you, you move it from the left all the way to the farthest right, whatever that journey looks like for you and your company. And that's it. So that's all you need to know about how to use Jira software, because as long as you can master that movement from left to right, people are not going to yell at you. And so let's wrap this up. We're down to the last minute here. So just real quickly, if you like this course, right, make sure you follow me on LinkedIn. Let me know in a message. I get a lot of requests. I have like 400 pending requests. Let me know in the message that you came from the class, so I accept it. But follow me on LinkedIn. Subscribe to ApeTech. Links are in this QR code. So subscribe to the ApeTech one. I already showed you a bunch of courses there. Subscribe to this channel. We are trying to monetize this channel, so we haven't quite gotten there just yet. So we are 1,000 hours away. So if you can watch all of our videos, we have a lot of 1-hour interviews that are worth your time, guaranteed. Don't sue me though. But yeah, watch those. Help us get. We're down to like the last 1,000 hours, so definitely watch all of our 1 hour videos here. I have free courses hosted on Salto. Again, links in there. I have a 5 hour Udemy course. So if you want to really dig a little or dive a little deeper into how to use Jira, I have a like Jira for complete beginners course available. I'm working on Teachable and I'm working on instructor led. I do these every once in a while, so definitely follow me on LinkedIn so you know when it's time to sign up for the other ones. And then, of course, if you like the merch and you want to help support the channel, we got merch store here, and yeah, check them out. Hope everything is great with you all, and that's it for this class. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.